Dead America. The Militia of St. Mary's, Part 3, by Derek Slayton. Day 0+12. Just before dawn. Tatum and Edgar perched in a small blind nestled within the embrace of a towering tree, elevated about 10 feet above the ground. They had occupied this tranquil haven for a couple of hours now, Tatum's nerves on edge throughout the duration. Edgar leaned against the wooden wall, cocooned in a thick coat that shielded him from the crisp air. With nimble fingers, he tended to a diminutive camping stove, its gentle flames flickering beneath a kettle. He monitored its progress with hawk-like precision, ready to withdraw it from the heat just before it reached its crescendo. Meanwhile, Tatum gazed out into the expanse of wilderness beyond, the barrel of a hunting rifle trained on the horizon. "I still can't believe you talked me into this," Tatum remarked. "I thought you might find it relaxing," Edgar replied evenly. "It is relaxing, but that's the problem," Tatum confessed. "There's so much that still needs to get done, and I'm out here relaxing." "Which is exactly why you need to be relaxing," Edgar countered. "You've been working 16-hour days ever since this thing began. You're no good to anybody burned out, Tatum." "Yeah, I know, but I can always rest later," Tatum retorted. "Or you can shut up, enjoy the view, and keep an eye out for a deer while I fix us a cup of coffee," Edgar suggested with a hint of amusement. "Come on, Edgar, you know there's stuff that needs to get done," Tatum persisted. Edgar cast Tatum a glance laden with a warning that spoke volumes, a warning Tatum intercepted before it could materialize into words. "And I know hunting is vital and needs to be done. But there's 50 people in town who could be here right now and it wouldn't change anything," Tatum interjected preemptively. "Tatum, you've been a dear friend of mine for many years now," Edgar began solemnly. "We've broken bread together, hunted together, and forged an unbreakable bond in the crucible of battle, so I don't say these next words lightly." Tatum pivoted away from his scope, directing his full attention to Edgar. "If you don't shut up and start relaxing, I'm going to tell Maggie," Edgar declared with a seriousness that demanded attention. Tatum held Edgar's gaze, met with the most solemn expression he had ever seen on his friend's face. After a beat, a smile cracked on Tatum's lips, and he shook his head. "That's low, Edgar," Tatum remarked, his tone laced with humor. "Sometimes you gotta go low, brother, if you want to do the right thing," Edgar replied earnestly. Tatum chuckled softly as Edgar lifted the kettle from the flame, deftly preparing their morning brew by swirling instant coffee into the steaming water. With the landscape now illuminated by the gentle rays of the rising sun, Tatum refocused his attention, scanning the horizon. His eyes widened as he spotted a deer in the distance, a majestic buck. Speaking in hushed tones, he remarked, "Looks like we have a customer." Edgar froze in place, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle the animal. Meanwhile, Tatum adjusted his sights with precision before gently squeezing the trigger. The bullet found its mark, striking the deer's heart. It collapsed to the ground momentarily before attempting to rise and flee. However, its strength ebbed away, and it succumbed to its wound after a brief struggle, coming to rest a few hundred yards away. "Okay, he's down," Tatum confirmed. "Let's go make sure." "I'd hate to go through all this trouble and not bring back something to eat," Edgar suggested pragmatically. "I thought you went to all this trouble to get me to relax," Tatum teased. "Your relaxation doesn't fill my belly," Edgar retorted. "Apparently it does," Tatum quipped, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. Tatum's grin widened as he proudly displayed his firearm, eliciting laughter from both men. Edgar swiftly poured coffee into travel mugs, sealing them tight before gesturing toward the latter. "Well, let's go see if you're as good a shot as you think you are," Edgar remarked with a playful glint in his eye. Descending to the forest floor, they surveyed their surroundings before orienting themselves toward the fallen deer and setting off. Edgar couldn't help but notice Tatum's lingering unease about being away from town. "Okay, so it seems as though my threat to tell Maggie isn't doing the trick. Looks like I'm going to have to resort to something a little harsher," Edgar mused. Tatum chuckled, taking a sip of his coffee to ward off the morning chill. Normally, I would protest, but we have a bit of a hike. Hit me, Tatum replied with a grin. Do you not trust us? Edgar's question stopped Tatum in his tracks, his expression shifting to one of disbelief as he turned to face his friend. How could you even ask that of me? After everything we've been through with this apocalypse? Tatum responded, his voice tinged with emotion. Hey, don't get mad at me. I'm asking a serious question, Edgar insisted. Of course I trust you. I trust all you guys with my life, Tatum affirmed. Then why aren't you doing it right now? Edgar pressed, his tone grave. Tatum regarded Edgar with a puzzled expression, uncertain of the meaning behind his words. It took him a few moments to grasp the significance, but as understanding dawned, Tatum nodded in acknowledgement before Edgar elaborated. There it is. Glad I finally figured out how to flick that light switch, Edgar remarked with a wry grin. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I trust you guys to have my back in life or death situations, so I should trust you guys to have my back when it comes to the mundane stuff, Tatum concurred. I was going to go with back-breaking labor, but sure, mundane stuff works too, Edgar quipped. Tatum chuckled, the camaraderie between them easing the tension of the moment as they continued their trek toward the fallen deer. I do trust you, Edgar. I hope you know that, Tatum affirmed. Oh, I know you do, brother. And we trust you too. You're doing a hell of a job navigating us through this mess and saving a lot of lives too, Edgar praised. About that, I'm starting to get a little concerned about the size of our town. I think we pushed over 300 yesterday with that new caravan that rolled in. Tatum expressed his worry. Yeah, but there was another doctor in that group, so we'll make it work, Edgar reassured him. A shame there wasn't a nutritionist in there. Might help with the rations, Tatum remarked thoughtfully. I was kind of hoping for a moonshiner, but to each their own, Edgar joked. Both men shared a hearty laugh as they laid eyes on the deer, motionless about 50 yards ahead. And this will help out too. He's a big boy, Edgar remarked, nodding toward the fallen animal. I hope so, Tatum replied, a hint of solemnity in his tone. Taking a knee beside the deer, Tatum placed a comforting hand on its head. I'm sorry, big fella, I really am. But I will make sure your sacrifice isn't in vain. You're going to keep a lot of bellies full, Tatum murmured softly, his gesture one of reverence. After a moment, Tatum rose to his feet, and Edgar joined him, kneeling to inspect the formidable antlers. We can probably use these bad boys too. Those things are sharp as hell, Edgar observed. Nothing goes to waste, Tatum affirmed. Understood, Edgar acknowledged. As they stood there, contemplating the task ahead, they heard the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. Both men instinctively raised their weapons, readying themselves for a potential threat. They relaxed their guard when they recognized Frank emerging from the woods. Jesus, Frank, that's a great way to get shot, Tatum scolded with a mixture of relief and exasperation. Yeah, well, next time turn on your damn radios, Frank retorted with a sheepish grin. Tatum shot Edgar a look tinged with anger, prompting Edgar to raise his hands in a gesture of innocence. Hey, don't look at me. Maggie said you needed to relax and that they could handle everything, Edgar defended himself. Clearly that wasn't the case. What's going on, Frank? Tatum demanded, his tone clipped. We got a distress call from this town just up the road called Rosalia, Frank explained. Where the hell is that? Never heard of it, Edgar interjected. It's about 50 miles to the west, just across the state line, Frank clarified. And they're not having a good day, I take it? Tatum inquired. They said that they're being overrun by those things, Frank confirmed. It can't be too many of those things if they're out in the middle of nowhere like we are, Edgar speculated. I looked them up on the map. They're on the main highway due south of Spokane, Frank informed them. So if those things are starting to empty out of the city, they'd be right in the line of fire. Tatum sighed. running his fingers through his hair as he contemplated their next move. "How big of a town is it?" Tatum asked. The guy that called it in, Mike, said they only have about 200 people in town, but most of them are either too young or too old to fight, Frank replied. Tatum glanced at Edgar, who responded with a nonchalant shrug. "You know me, I'm always ready for a fight. We'll follow your lead," Edgar declared confidently. After a moment of consideration, Tatum nodded in agreement. "Okay, we'll go help them out. But they are not coming here. We'll help them every way we can when it comes to fortifying their town. But we just don't have the resources to take in that many people who aren't physically capable of defending themselves," Tatum stated firmly. Both Frank and Edgar nodded in understanding. "What are we doing about this big boy? It doesn't feel right leaving this out here all by itself," Edgar inquired, concern evident in his voice. "I got you covered, Edgar. I figured with 2 elite huntsmen like yourselves, you'd have bagged something by now. So I brought along some townsfolk to help bring back your haul," Frank replied, pulling out the radio to make arrangements. "Hey, it's Frank. Do you copy?" Frank spoke into the radio. "Hey Frank, we haven't found them yet," a voice responded. "Yeah, no worries, big guy. I tracked them down. We have to rush back to town, but just like I thought, they bagged a beauty. Would you two mind coming up here and picking it up?" Frank requested. "Absolutely, Frank. We'd be happy to do so," the voice on the other end replied. "All right then. Just meet us back at the truck, and I'll give you the coordinates," Frank instructed. "Copy that. See you in a few," the voice confirmed before signing off. Frank produced a handheld GPS device, pressing a button to mark the location. "Okay, let's head out," Frank announced, leading the way with purpose. As they strode briskly back toward the truck, Tatum addressed Frank. "Okay, Frank, do you have a line back to town?" Tatum inquired. "Got one in the truck," Frank confirmed. "Okay, when we get there, we need to have Eric do recon on the town, find out what we're dealing with. Reed and Devin need to get the gear loadout ready. I'm thinking a couple of 3-man teams, a sniper covering 2 on the ground, both working together." Tatum outlined the plan. Frank's expression turned incredulous as Tatum continued discussing the mission. Finally, Tatum ceased his instructions. "What?" Tatum queried, noticing Frank's reaction. "Tatum, we've already done that. We knew you'd want to go help, so we have the trucks loaded up, gears ready, and Eric has a full workup on the town. He even has suggested attack patterns," Frank revealed. Tatum looked at Frank, a sense of admiration evident in his gaze. "That's some good work, Frank," Tatum acknowledged. "We knew you were taking some much-needed downtime. In fact, the only reason we're out here to collect you at all is that Maggie said she'd beat us with a baseball bat if we ran off on a rescue mission without you," Frank explained. "And she would do it too," Tatum added with a chuckle. "That girl has a mean swing," Edgar chimed in, eliciting laughter from the group as they continued toward the vehicles. "Like I told you, Tatum. We got your back, brother," Edgar affirmed, his words carrying a sense of camaraderie. Tatum nodded in appreciation as the 3 of them headed back to the vehicles, ready to face another day of rescue missions together. Chapter 2. The convoy, comprising of Tatum, Eric, Reed, Frank, Edgar, and Devin, tore down the highway en route to Rosalia. As the town loomed closer, signs for the intersection with Highway 95 came into view. "Okay, Tatum, start slowing down. The town is right at the next intersection," Frank instructed. "Do we have any way to contact the people in town?" Tatum inquired. Frank nodded, producing a walkie-talkie and dialing up the proper frequency before handing it over to Tatum. "The guy's name is Mike." Tatum acknowledged with a nod as he steered the vehicle to the side of the road, about half a mile from the highway intersection. The town lay just ahead, with the dim outlines of buildings visible beyond it. "Hey Mike, do you copy? This is Tatum. You called us for help with a zombie problem?" Tatum's voice crackled through the device, followed by a brief delay before a response. Oh, thank God, I was starting to think you guys weren't going to make it. Mike's voice came through. Now, what kind of neighbors would that make us? We're here to help. Tell us what the situation is, Tatum reassured. We have a bunch of people trapped downtown at the restaurant. And then there's a couple dozen of those things roaming through the neighborhood. Some of the boys and I have been trying to pick them off when they wander by the house, but we haven't been able to get out and do a proper hunt, Mike explained. Are you guys not physically capable of going on a hunt? Tatum inquired. With those slow ones, yeah. We can pick those off with no problem. But when that mob showed up overnight, it caught a few people by surprise, Mike responded. Tatum released a weary sigh, glancing over at Frank, who shook his head in response. With a click, he released the button on the walkie-talkie, signaling to Frank that they could speak freely. That means we have runners, Tatum remarked. It's never an easy day out here, is it? Frank mused. Tatum nodded slightly before returning to the walkie-talkie. Okay, Mike, this is very important. How many people did they catch by surprise? He inquired. I know of at least 4. There were 3 boys up by the barricade that got hit, and I personally saw one person get taken out by one of those fast ones. As soon as I saw that, I grabbed a kid that was running from them and got back to the house. I haven't left since, Mike responded. How busy was the downtown area when this hit? Tatum pressed. Not terribly busy. Maybe 20 people or so? It happened overnight, but we've been keeping the restaurant open all night since we have night patrols going through, Mike explained. Okay, we'll assume that it's more than 4 of those fast ones. Do you have any contact with the restaurant? Tatum asked. Yeah, I've been talking to them, but nobody could tell me anything I haven't told you, Mike confirmed. Okay, let them know that we're going to get them out first. And this is very important. Tell them not to help us. The last thing we need is someone inside the store popping off, Tatum instructed. Okay, Tatum, I'll tell them that. And thank you for coming, Mike responded. It's our pleasure. Now sit tight and keep an ear open. I'll let you know when we're coming through the neighborhood, Tatum assured. Copy that, Mike acknowledged. The line went dead, prompting Tatum to roll down his window and signal for the other vehicle to come up beside him. What are we looking at? Reed inquired as their vehicle pulled alongside. A downtown shit show is what we're looking at, Tatum responded bluntly. Sounds about right, Reed sighed, shaking his head. Minimum of 4 runners, possibly more, Tatum continued, delivering the grim news. Reed's expression reflected the seriousness of the situation. Clearly that's the priority. Yep. The bulk of them are around the restaurant, with another group roaming through the neighborhood, Tatum added, outlining the situation. It's on the other side of downtown, at least it looked that way from the map, Frank interjected. How do you want to play it? Reed asked, seeking direction. I want Devin up on the roof of some building overlooking the mob, Tatum decided, turning his attention to Devin. Devin popped his head out of the window eagerly. Just get me close to downtown and I'll find my way up. Eric, I need you up top too. You're the neighborhood spotter. Our focus is going to be on the restaurant, and if one of those runners wandered off, I don't want it catching us by surprise, Tatum instructed, assigning roles. You got it, Eric confirmed. Eric reached back, giving a fist bump to Devin in solidarity. I want Reed, Frank, and Edgar as a street-level strike team, ready to move up as soon as we take down the runners, Tatum directed. What are you going to do? Reed inquired, curious about Tatum's role in the plan. I'm going to go cruising right down Main Street. Give those runners a reason to show themselves. The sunroof trick hasn't let us down yet, and I don't see a reason why it would here, Tatum explained confidently. Everyone nodded in agreement as Tatum shifted the vehicle back into gear. Okay, let's get it done, he declared, determination in his voice. The group drove toward the highway, veering off-road to reach the southern edge of town. They made the turn back toward town, rejoining the highway half a mile down. As they gazed up toward the town, They could see the mob of creatures on the road. Frank took out binoculars, scanning the area. "How are we looking?" Tatum inquired. "Looks like there's 50 or 60 of those things." "A couple of blocks up from the edge of town," Frank reported. "Okay, I'm going to drop you guys off a quarter-mile from town. Let you move up quietly and get into position. Once you're ready, I'll roll right in," Tatum strategized. "Sounds like a plan," Frank agreed, ready to execute their mission. Tatum proceeded cautiously, advancing slowly to minimize engine noise, ensuring the creatures wouldn't be alerted until they were fully prepared. Finally, he came to a stop, signaling to everyone with hand gestures. Eric steered his SUV off the road, and the team disembarked, leaving only Tatum behind the wheel. "We'll radio when we're in position," Frank assured Tatum before joining the others in their dash toward the town. Tatum watched as his men raced toward their designated positions, breaking into their respective teams. While they moved, he took the opportunity to inspect his rifle, ensuring it was primed for action when the time came. As he sat there, scrutinizing his weapon, his thoughts drifted to their dwindling ammunition supply. Despite having access to a gun store, the rate at which they were using bullets was becoming a concern. While they weren't in immediate danger of running out, the supply of powerful rifle rounds was starting to dwindle. "We really need to start talking about rationing these," Tatum muttered to himself, holding up a single round for closer examination. "We don't know what's coming next, and we don't want to get caught with our pants down when whatever that is comes for us." He checked his magazines, confirming that the 3 extras he carried were fully loaded. "Yeah, that should be plenty for today," he concluded, determined to make the most of their resources. The radio crackled to life, bringing Devin's voice through the speakers. "Sniper and scout team in position. I have eyes on the restaurant, and Eric doesn't see anything within 2 blocks of downtown," Devin reported. "Copy that. Reed, how are you looking?" Tatum inquired, seeking an update from the street-level strike team. "We're 2 blocks up from the restaurant in the alley. If a runner goes for you, we'll cut it down," Reed responded. "Okay, here we go," Tatum announced. He reached up and opened the sunroof before shifting the SUV back into gear. With a gentle tap on the gas pedal, he initiated a slow advance, keeping the engine noise minimal. It wasn't until he reached the edge of town that he pressed harder on the gas, revving the engine to draw attention. Bringing the vehicle to a halt, he slammed it into park and laid on the horn. Instantly, several creatures at the rear of the mob turned, their moans filling the air as they began shuffling toward the source of the noise. Tatum climbed up through the sunroof, rifle in hand, scanning the crowd for any signs of the faster-moving runners. Initially, all he could see were the slow-moving zombies making their way toward him, but soon, he spotted disturbances in the crowd. Moments later, a creature broke through the pack, its pace far swifter than the others, as it searched for the source of the honking. Tatum aimed his rifle, but before he could fire, a shot echoed from above. He watched as the creature's head exploded, dropping it to the ground. He chuckled at the efficiency of Devin's sniper skills before readjusting his aim. Selecting his next target, a shambler about 30 yards away, he squeezed the trigger. The bullet tore through its head, dropping it instantly. The sound of gunfire began to agitate the zombies near the restaurant, prompting many of them to turn and shuffle toward Tatum. Undeterred, he continued firing, picking off several more of the encroaching horde as he stood tall in the sunroof, determined to hold his ground. As the crowd thinned out slightly, Tatum spotted more rapid movements. In a flash, 3 creatures broke through the ranks of the slower zombies, closing the distance between them and Tatum with alarming speed. A shot rang out from the sniper's nest, but to Tatum's surprise, none of the runners dropped. Confusion briefly clouded his mind, but he swiftly refocused as the immediate threat demanded his attention. Raising his weapon, Tatum opened fire at the sprinting dead. His initial shots missed, the agile creatures proving difficult targets to hit. However, he quickly adjusted his aim and managed to take down one of them with a precise headshot. Before he could recalibrate his aim for the remaining runners, the street-level strike team made their presence known. Emerging from the alleyway, they formed a tight line, unleashing a barrage of suppressing fire that helped to keep the runners at bay. Shoulder to shoulder, they reinforced Tatum's position, providing much-needed support in the heat of battle. The bullets found their marks, swiftly taking down the runners. However, the increased noise drew the attention of more creatures, a dozen of them turning their focus toward the street-level strike team. Tatum wasted no time in issuing orders. "Light them up," he shouted, rallying the group into action. Each member of the team began firing as rapidly as possible, emptying their magazines with precision shots aimed at the heads of the zombies. Round after round tore through the undead horde, steadily thinning their numbers. After a couple of intense minutes, the cacophony of gunfire finally subsided, leaving the street eerily quiet. Not a single creature remained standing, the area now littered with motionless bodies. As they stood amidst the aftermath, surveying the carnage, another shot rang out from above. Tatum's voice boomed upwards toward the rooftop. "What the hell is going on up there?" he demanded. Moments later, Eric appeared, peering down at Tatum from the roof. "We had a couple of runners coming this way, but the threat has been neutralized," Eric explained. "Then why is he still shooting?" Tatum pressed. "There are still some stragglers coming this way," Eric clarified. "Tell him to hold his fire," Tatum ordered firmly. "We need to conserve those sniper rounds. We'll do a pass through the neighborhood." "You got it. We'll keep watch until you give the all clear," Eric acknowledged before disappearing from view. Tatum turned his attention to the ground team, letting out a sharp whistle to grab their attention. "Reed, get in here and get in the sunroof. We're going to do some drive-bys," he instructed. Reed chuckled, swiftly making his way to the vehicle and climbing into the sunroof. "The rest of you, make sure those things are down for the count. Once you're clear, get to the restaurant and wait for my call," Tatum directed. Frank and Edgar nodded in understanding before proceeding up the road toward the restaurant. Just as Tatum and Reed were about to depart, the walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Hey Tatum, are you there?" Mike's voice came through. "Yeah, I read you, Mike. We're about to do a pass through the neighborhood and clean it up. Just sit tight and you'll be good to go in just a few minutes," Tatum responded. "That's what I'm calling about. I just heard from one of the boys who I thought got taken out by those things. He wasn't there when it happened because he was out on a scouting mission. We got one hell of a problem," Mike relayed urgently. Tatum and Reed exchanged a concerned glance before Tatum replied, "Okay, Mike. As soon as I give the all clear, you get your ass down to the restaurant." "You got it," Mike confirmed before the line went dead. "Nothing's ever easy, is it?" Reed remarked. "Not of late, nope. So much for my relaxing morning," Tatum replied wryly, a hint of frustration in his voice. Tatum shifted the SUV into gear, and he and Reed sped off into the neighborhood, ready to mop up the remnants of the zombies. Chapter 3. Tatum maneuvered the SUV, parking it a couple of blocks away from the restaurant. Stepping out alongside Reed, they were met with a grim scene that unfolded before them. Strewn across the road were the remnants of a massacre, with the bodies of 50 to 60 individuals covered in grime and decay, testament to weeks of exposure to the unforgiving elements. The runners, comparatively unscathed save for the telltale marks of their recent bites, were being examined by a few locals, their expressions a mix of sorrow and disbelief at the sight of their fallen friends and neighbors. Though heavy-hearted, the locals offered a nod of gratitude as Tatum and Reed passed by, receiving a nod in return from the two militia members as they continued towards the restaurant. Approaching, Frank emerged with a middle-aged man sporting blonde hair in tow. "Hey Tatum, this is Mike," Frank introduced, prompting a handshake between the two, with Mike conveying his gratitude through a nod. "We can't thank you enough for coming to our aid," Mike expressed earnestly. "I don't think we would have been able to dig ourselves out of that hole if it wasn't for you." "It was our pleasure, Mike," Tatum replied. "Now, tell me about this big problem." Mike nodded as his gaze shifted back to the restaurant, taking a moment to locate his intended target. Spotting him, he let out a sharp whistle, pointing towards a young man not yet 20. "Jimmy, get over here," Mike called out, prompting the young man to break away from the line for food, his grip tight on a backpack as he approached. Despite his attempts to exude confidence, it was evident to Tatum and Reed that he was shaken, his demeanor betraying the weight of things witnessed that couldn't be unseen. "Yeah, Mike?" Jimmy responded, his voice carrying a tremor as he met the gaze of Tatum and Reed. "These men are here to help. Tell them what you told me," Mike instructed, his tone gentle yet firm. Jimmy nodded, steeling himself before speaking. "I was on guard duty with the others last night, but I noticed we had a pretty bright moon and thought I could take advantage of it, you know? We haven't had much of that lately, and I was hoping I could." Jimmy's voice trailed off, his expression clouding with regret. "You know, it doesn't matter what I hoped. I skipped out on my friends and they're gone now," he added. "You being there wouldn't have changed that young man. You would just be dead along with them," Tatum interjected, his voice carrying a note of reassurance. "Now, please tell us what you saw." Jimmy took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "I was way out in the woods when I heard the gunshots in town. By the time I got back and saw the mob, it was too late," he recounted, his voice tinged with sorrow. "It took me a moment to realize what happened, those things coming down the highway, but once I did, I knew what I had to do. I hopped on my ATV and started riding north. If those things snuck up on us, God only knows what was coming our way." "And what did you find?" Tatum inquired, his gaze intent. Jimmy let out a sigh, reaching into his backpack and rummaging through its contents before producing a digital camera. Clicking it on, he scrolled through the images for a moment before handing it over. "I saw this in Plaza. About 15 miles to the north of here," Jimmy explained as he passed the camera to Tatum and Reed. As they examined the image, their expressions shifted to one of grave concern. "Jesus Christ," Reed muttered, his shock evident. "If you hit this button, you can see more images," Jimmy offered. Nodding, Tatum clicked through the pictures, each one revealing a sizable horde of creatures numbering in the hundreds. "I don't know how many there are, but it was enough to go through the entirety of Plaza. Granted, it's not that big, but it's big enough," Jimmy remarked solemnly. "And they're coming this way?" Tatum inquired, his voice laced with urgency. Jimmy nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I watched them for half an hour, making sure they were moving and not just hanging out." "How fast are they moving?" Tatum pressed further. "Faster than I'd like," Jimmy admitted, his tone tinged with apprehension. "Jimmy, that's not an answer, boy," Mike interjected sharply. "I'm sorry, I don't know how fast they're moving. They're not like those runners, but they're marching our way," Jimmy clarified. "Thank you, Jimmy. Go get yourself something to eat," Tatum instructed. Jimmy glanced over at Mike, who offered a reassuring nod, prompting the young man to dart back towards the food station. "So, what do you think?" Mike inquired, turning his attention back to Tatum. "I think if we had some buses, it might be a good idea to evacuate the town," Tatum suggested, contemplating the options. "Look around, Tatum. Do these look like the kind of people who would abandon their homes?" Mike countered, gesturing towards the survivors scattered around them. Surveying the rugged and determined faces of the survivors, Tatum and Reed couldn't help but acknowledge Mike's point. "No, I don't suppose they are," Tatum conceded, understanding the sentiment. "And I can't say that I blame them. We're not exactly the running types either. Besides, if we let them wander through town, all that would do is pose a major threat to your south, as well as to the north. These things need to be dealt with. So, what do we do?" Mike inquired, his tone reflective of the gravity of the situation. "First things first, we need eyes on the situation," Tatum declared, formulating a plan. "I'll get Devin and head out right now," Reed offered. "Keep your distance. We just need to know their numbers and how fast they're moving," Tatum cautioned. "You got it," Reed affirmed. Devin, move your ass. We got a situation on our hands. The rest of you, on Tatum, Reed commanded. As Reed and Devin hurried out, Frank, Eric, and Edgar approached Tatum, who signaled for them to follow him and Mike outside, away from the other civilians, so as not to alarm them. "What's up, Tatum?" Eric inquired as they gathered. "We have incoming, and from the sounds of it, they make this group look like a welcoming committee," Tatum replied grimly. "Jesus," Edgar muttered in disbelief. "I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but I'm assuming we didn't pack enough ammunition to take out 1,000 of these things." Tatum posed the question, his expression resigned. "Maybe if we had half a day and they were stationary," Eric offered, shaking his head. "Even then, we'd still be a couple hundred short." "Shit," Tatum cursed under his breath, grappling with the harsh reality. "I'm sorry, Tatum. I had no idea we'd be dealing with something this big," Eric apologized earnestly. "It's okay. Even if we had the ammunition to do it, burning through that many bullets is a bad idea," Tatum said. "Yeah, it's not like the delivery truck is going to be showing up anytime soon," Frank added somberly. "So what do we do?" Mike interjected, his gaze steady as he looked to Tatum for guidance. "We start pulling together everything we can to slow them down, and start figuring out other ways we can take them down," Tatum declared, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Well, the gas station in town got a refill about a week before all this stuff started. We haven't really been using a whole lot of it either," Mike suggested. "Okay, have your people start making some Molotovs. Just as many as you can," Tatum instructed. "If memory serves, burning these things doesn't do a great job of killing them," Frank pointed out. "No, but if we can burn them enough, we can slow them down, which is what we need right now," Tatum countered. "What about buses? Surely a town this size has a school," Edgar suggested hopefully. "We do, but the bus was kept at the driver's house, who lived on the other side of Plaza," Mike explained. "Yeah, that figures," Edgar sighed. "Then start pulling cars. If it runs, get it up to the road and start barricading the highway. A mob that size will be able to push through it eventually, but the more stuff we can throw in their way, the better," Tatum said. Tatum pondered for a moment before a plan began to form in his mind. "Where is the school?" he inquired, turning to Mike for information. "It's on the north side of town, just off the highway," Mike replied. "What do you mean just off the highway?" Tatum pressed for clarification. "I mean, technically it's a block off, but there's an open sports field between the building and the road," Mike explained. "That's where we're making our stand. When you set up the barricade, make sure it's to the south of the school," Tatum directed decisively. Confusion rippled through the group, but Tatum pressed on with his plan. "We're going to use that building like a fortress. Pull them off the road, keep them occupied, and take them down one at a time through the windows," he elaborated. "With what?" Edgar interjected, voicing the concern that lingered in everyone's minds. "Surely this town has something we can turn into a spear, right?" Tatum challenged, scanning the faces of his companions for affirmation. All eyes turned to Mike, who nodded in agreement. "Oh yeah, we can get some things together. Might not be the prettiest things to look at though," Mike confirmed. "They're about to be coated with zombie brains, so I don't think that's much of an issue," Frank quipped, eliciting a grim chuckle from the group. Before they could delve further into preparations, the walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Hey Tatum, do you copy?" Reed's voice rang out. "Yeah, we're here, Reed. What do you have?" Tatum responded promptly. "Well, the kid was half right," Reed reported. "What do you mean half right?" Tatum inquired, a sense of unease creeping into his voice. "There's certainly a mob headed our way, but he grossly underestimated the size. There might be 2,000 of those things, and they're moving like they're late to an appointment," Reed said. Tatum surveyed the group, noting the discontent etched on their faces in response to the grim news. "How long until they get to town?" He pressed Reed. At the rate they're going? 2 hours if we're lucky, Reed replied. Christ. Okay, get your asses back to town. We have an idea, Tatum directed. Based on the tone in your voice, I'm sure it's another one we're going to love, Reed remarked dryly. Aren't they always? Tatum retorted with a wry grin. We'll be there in a minute, Reed acknowledged before signing off. 2 hours, my God. Is that going to be enough time? Mike questioned. It damn well better be, Tatum asserted firmly, slipping into commander mode as he began issuing orders. Okay, Eric, grab some people from the restaurant and start working on those cars. Every vehicle you can find, block the highway, and try to aim those things towards the school, Tatum instructed, his tone decisive. Eric nodded in acknowledgement before hastening off to carry out the task. Frank, Edgar, grab some people and get over to the school. I want every window that is at least chest high opened up, and as many pointed objects as you can get in the classrooms, Tatum continued. I got an idea about the hallway, Edgar interjected. Let's hear it, Tatum encouraged. If we send that many things towards the school, there's a good chance they get inside. If we take every desk and throw it into the hallway, that should slow them down. Those things aren't exactly agile, Edgar proposed. Do it, just make sure there's a path for us to move, Tatum approved. Edgar nodded in agreement, and the two of them set off to carry out their assigned tasks. So what do we do? Mike inquired, turning to Tatum for guidance. You and I are going to get every person who can't fight to someplace safe, Tatum replied. Some of the houses on the back row of the neighborhood are solidly built, Mike suggested. Good enough for me. Make sure they have enough food and supplies to last a few days, just in case, Tatum instructed. Every house is stocked up pretty good. One of the locals is a truck driver who decided against delivering his load to Spokane on the morning everything went downhill, Mike added, a hint of relief in his voice. Tatum smirked, acknowledging the stroke of luck that had befallen the town. That works for me. Come on, time is not on our side. Chapter 4. Reed and Devin cruised northward on the highway, the clinking of bottles echoing from the back seat as they traveled. Soon, their eyes fell upon the horde of ghouls staggering down the road. Stopping a safe distance away, they observed the spectacle in silence, absorbing the magnitude of the scene. I don't think I've ever seen this many of those things in one place, Reed remarked. It's no different than facing down the group we just wiped out in town, Devin replied. How in the hell do you figure that? Reed questioned. They're still slow, stupid, and vulnerable to a headshot. There's just more of them, so it's going to take longer to deal with them, Devin explained. You are way too calm for what we're staring down, Reed observed. Devin merely shrugged, maintaining his nonchalant demeanor. It's a couple thousand of these things. If we're smart, it won't be an issue. Sure, we're going to be tired as hell and we'll need a fire truck to hose us off at the end of the day, but there's nothing to get worked up about. Reed shot him a curious look, uncertain if Devin was serious or teasing him. Regardless, Reed shook his head and gestured for Devin to follow. Come on, let's start slowing these things down, Reed urged. They both emerged from the SUV, each grasping a milk crate packed with Molotov cocktails. Just before they set off, Devin paused, eyeing one of the bottles with a shake of his head. He plucked it from the crate and returned it to the vehicle. What in the hell are you doing? Reed inquired. It's a 25-year-old Scotch. There isn't any way in hell I'm wasting that beauty on those things, Devin explained. Reed chuckled, shaking his head, as they advanced toward the approaching mob, stopping 50 yards from the horde and a couple of 100 yards from their vehicle. Setting down their crates, they stretched their throwing arms. So if I tear my rotator cuff throwing these things, we get workman's comp, right? Devin joked. What does it say in your employee handbook? Reed countered. I'm not sure I used it for kindling, Devin quipped. Well, we will just have to cross that bridge when we get to it, Reed replied, joining in the laughter at the absurdity of the situation, refocusing on the task at hand. Each man picked up a Molotov, preparing to light it and standing poised as the zombies continued their relentless march. Did you ever think it would come to this? Devin pondered aloud. Reed regarded Devin with a mixture of concern and confusion, his head shaking slightly. Did I ever think it would come to what exactly? Reed inquired. Standing in the middle of a highway, getting ready to set fire to a whole mess of people. Devin clarified. No, Devin, I can't say that I did. In fact, I'm pretty confident I've never even seen this situation in a horror movie, so the thought never crossed my mind, Reed replied honestly. Consider yourself lucky, Devin remarked. Reed studied Devin's expression, detecting something beneath his nonchalant facade. Are you doing okay, Devin? Reed asked, his concern growing. I saw some shit when I was overseas, man. That's all, Devin explained cryptically. Do you need to talk about it? Reed offered, genuine concern in his voice. Probably, Devin admitted. A heavy silence fell between them, Reed waiting patiently for Devin to open up. After a moment, Reed broke the silence. Well, I'm here. Talk it out, man, Reed encouraged. Devin hesitated before responding, his tone somewhat dismissive. Oh no, I said I should probably talk about it. It doesn't mean I'm going to, Devin deflected, his attempt at humor falling flat. I'm going to rehearse with that bottle of scotch later, so we'll see how that goes, Devin added, attempting to lighten the mood with a hint of sarcasm. Reed managed to force out a chuckle, masking his concern for his friend's well-being. But before he could express his worries, Devin ignited the first Molotov and hurled it into the fray. They watched as the flaming glass bottle flew through the air, shattering on impact with the zombie's skull, the fiery liquid spreading among the nearby creatures. Without a word, Devin swiftly grabbed another Molotov, igniting it and launching it once more. You know, this will go a lot quicker if you start throwing too, Devin remarked, urging Reed into action. Reed snapped back to attention, nodding as he lit his own Molotov. Together, they spent the next few moments hurling half a dozen fiery cocktails into the horde, engulfing the first several rows of zombies in flames. Grabbing their crates, they began a strategic retreat, putting distance between themselves and the advancing horde. 50 yards back, they halted, turning to survey the scene. The flames had done their job, weakening the initial ranks of the creatures until they collapsed. As the zombies behind stumbled over their burning companions, some catching fire themselves, the charred ghouls were quickly buried under the stampede of the horde. Despite their efforts, it didn't take long for the burning undead to disappear beneath the relentless advance of the horde. Is it just me, or does this feel like we're throwing rocks in the ocean, hoping that it will stop the tide from rolling in? Devin mused, voicing the frustration of their seemingly futile efforts. Yeah, I know. But every minute we can buy them, the better off we'll be, Reed replied. You keep throwing, I'll be right back, Devin declared, striding away before Reed could protest, sensing Devin's determination. Reed nodded, deciding not to push the issue, especially after their earlier conversation. As he continued hurling Molotovs, he noticed Devin returning, carrying an assault rifle. What are you doing? Reed questioned, surprised by Devin's choice of weaponry. Slowing them down, Devin stated simply, raising the rifle and taking aim. Rather than aiming for headshots, Devin targeted the knees of the creatures at the forefront of the horde. With rapid precision, he fired half a dozen rounds, each finding its mark and sending ghouls crashing to the ground. You missed the head, Reed said. Wasn't aiming for it, Devin replied, gesturing towards the fallen creatures. They watched as the incapacitated zombies struggled to rise, their flailing limbs causing chaos among their ranks. Maybe it's just me, but this seems to be working a bit better, Devin remarked, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Reed shrugged, acknowledging the effectiveness of Devin's strategy. You keep at it. I'll get the car moved back a ways so we have time to keep slowing them down, Reed said. Devon nodded in acknowledgement as he continued firing into the crowd, focused on their makeshift defense. Meanwhile, Reed swiftly made his way back to the SUV, tossing the remaining Molotovs into the back seat before jumping in. As he reversed a few hundred yards, he grabbed the radio. "Hey Tatum, do you copy?" Reed radioed. "I'm here, Reed. What's your status?" came Tatum's response. "We're slowing them down. I figure we might be able to buy you an extra 15 minutes or so," Reed reported. "We're going to need it. How soon until you guys are back here?" Tatum inquired. 30 minutes, give or take. That should put those things a little more than an hour outside of town, Reed estimated. "Good. When you boys wrap up, hurry back, because we could use a hand," Tatum replied urgently. "Copy that. We won't be long," Reed assured. As the radio fell silent, Tatum clipped it onto his belt and surveyed the highway opposite the school. Several dozen cars were positioned strategically, forming a barricade. The backstop consisted of 12 vehicles, arranged 4 across and 3 deep, providing a sturdy defense. About 50 yards ahead, another dozen vehicles were lined up similarly, but instead of being stacked tightly like the backstop, they were spread out, creating pockets along the road. Tatum shook his head as he took in the scene, emitting a sharp whistle before motioning for Frank to join him. "What's up, Tatum?" Frank asked, approaching. "I think we should take that middle row and move those cars to the back here," Tatum suggested. "The backstop is pretty solid. It's not going anywhere," Frank pointed out. "That's not what I'm saying. I think it needs to be on the opposite side of the road, boxing them in. So when they start bunching up, they won't be able to wander off into town," Tatum explained. "Sure thing. Oh, and Mike wanted to see you up by the front of the line," Frank added before heading off to assist with the barricade. Tatum nodded in acknowledgement and proceeded towards the first group of cars on the highway, where several individuals were busy fortifying the barricade with makeshift fasteners. Mike stood in front of them, positioned behind a pickup truck. "What have you got, Mike?" Tatum inquired. "Do we know how much time we've got?" Mike asked, concern etched on his face. "Maybe an hour," Tatum replied. "I can work with that. Come here. I want your opinion." Mike beckoned Tatum over to the back of the truck, where thick metal beams and a long length of chain lay. "So what I'm thinking is, if we can get these in the ground a few feet deep, we can hook the chain on it and run it across the road," Mike explained, outlining his plan. Tatum paused to consider the proposal, mentally visualizing the scenario. After a moment, he began nodding in agreement. "So when those things come through, the ones at the front are just pushed through the chain," Tatum clarified. Mike's expression soured as he contemplated the grim reality, shaking his head in disbelief. "I mean, I was just thinking it would slow them down some. But I guess if these things really don't feel pain, that might happen. If it did, it would be good for us," Mike acknowledged reluctantly. "Make it happen," Tatum said. Mike nodded in agreement, whistling for a couple of others to assist in setting up the defensive measures. Meanwhile, as Tatum headed back, the radio crackled to life. "Tatum, I need you over at the school," Edgar's voice came through. On the way, Tatum responded promptly, altering his course towards the school, located a couple of 100 yards from the highway. With a clear path to the building, Tatum ensured there were no obstacles for the zombies to become entangled in. Approaching the back door, he saw Edgar waving him in. "I heard Reed on the radio. We have an hour until showtime?" Edgar queried. "It appears that way." "What do you have for me?" Tatum asked. Together, they entered the building, finding themselves in a long hallway stretching for a couple of 100 yards, lined with rows of desks. "Well, this looks like a mess," Tatum remarked, surveying the chaotic scene. "Thank you. I take my job seriously," Edgar replied with a hint of sarcasm. "How in the hell do we get through this?" Tatum wondered aloud. "I put rows of desks every 5 yards or so. There are pathways alternating from the right to the left on each one. So the first one we go to the right, the next one to the left, and so on," Edgar explained. Easy enough, Tatum acknowledged, relieved by the simplicity of the plan. The good news is, these doors open outward, and they're metal storm doors. So I don't think they're getting in here. The lunchroom is another story, Edgar added. As they navigated the pathway down the hallway, Tatum glanced into the schoolrooms they passed. In each one, a handful of civilians were busy sharpening broomsticks and affixing knives onto metal pipes for added reach. Looks like the spear project is coming along, Tatum remarked. Oh yeah, we should have 100 ready to go for when they get here. There's only 5 classrooms on this hall, so 20 each should do it, Edgar confirmed. I want one of us in a room with 3 civilians, Tatum instructed. Who is the odd man out? Edgar inquired. I want Devin across the highway keeping an eye on everything, Tatum decided. He always gets the fun assignments, Edgar commented wryly. Tatum smirked as they reached the lunchroom. He sighed as he beheld a large pane of glass with spiderwebbing cracks throughout it. Yeah, that's not going to hold very long, now is it? Tatum observed. Nope, and we really don't have a way to shore it up, Edgar admitted. It's all good. We'll figure it out. Hopefully we can keep them in front of the windows, Tatum replied optimistically. Here's hoping. Is there anything else you want me to get set up? Edgar asked. Make sure there's food and water in all the classrooms. This might take a while, Tatum instructed. Edgar nodded before heading off towards the lunchroom. Tatum turned to the weakened glass, giving it a tap. Oh, I hope that you hold. Chapter 5. Devin scaled the building situated just east of the highway, positioning himself approximately 20 yards behind the barricade. He carefully placed his sniper rifle at the edge, settling into a comfortable position before retrieving his binoculars and walkie-talkie. With a focused gaze, he surveyed the highway below, immediately spotting the vast horde of creatures steadily advancing. Their relentless march indicated a singular purpose, driven by an instinctual desire for something ahead, though uncertain of its exact nature. Nonetheless, they pressed on with unwavering determination. The group of civilians stationed at the first barricade, clutching their hunting rifles tightly, stood about 100 yards away from the approaching threat. Okay, everybody, Devin spoke into the walkie-talkie, it's just about showtime. The party guests are 100 yards away from the first checkpoint. I know you boys there are eager to get things rolling, but give them another 50 yards before you roll out the welcome mat. Give me a thumbs up if you hear me. Adjusting his view to the barricade line, Devin observed as a couple of the men raised their thumbs in acknowledgement. Good. That's what I like to see, he continued. Now I know we've been over this, but you go on my mark. I don't care what you think you see on the ground right in front of you. When I say move, you move. Give me another thumbs up if you heard that. Once again, the men responded with thumbs up, though a couple of them trembled visibly, their fear palpable as the mob loomed less than a football field away. Okay, and one last thing, Devin added, his voice steady despite the tension. Always remember that you have a guardian angel looking down on you. Now let's show these assholes what this town is made of. Setting aside the binoculars, Devin switched to his rifle, maintaining his seated position while adjusting to ensure a steady firing stance. As he prepared, the sound of gunshots erupted from the first barricade below. Initially sporadic, the gunfire quickly escalated into a rapid barrage. Devin scanned the front lines of the approaching mob, witnessing the fall of zombie after zombie under the relentless assault. Devin carefully squeezed off a single round, the bullet tearing through the head of a zombie below, ensuring his range was dialed in. Shifting his focus to the chain stretched across the highway, Devin observed as the creatures at the forefront became entangled in its barrier. Despite their struggles, those behind them relentlessly pushed forward, driven by a primal urge to advance. Before long, the chain began to cleave through the bodies of the creatures, severing them at the waist as their upper halves continued to crawl forward. Approximately 40 of the undead were halved by the unforgiving metal, their torsos persisting in their futile journey. However, the chain's integrity faltered after a few moments, giving way under the relentless pressure. As the chain snapped, the severed torsos were swiftly buried beneath a tide of frenzied feet as the mob surged onward. Undeterred, the men at the barricade continued their relentless barrage of gunfire. The battle raged on for several intense minutes, with the exchange of gunfire echoing through the air as dozens of rounds were expended. As the front edge of the zombie horde closed in on the cars, the men at the barricade swiftly slung their rifles over their shoulders, drawing their handguns in preparation for close-quarters combat. With practiced efficiency, the men aimed and fired with rapid precision, swiftly mowing down an entire line of zombies that lay face down in their wake. However, the threat persisted as creatures began to emerge from the sides of the vehicles, prompting the men to shift their aim and continue their onslaught. "Okay, everybody, move to the next station," Devin yelled. Much to Devin's surprise, the men heeded his command without hesitation, swiftly abandoning their posts and racing back to the next line of cars for cover. Seizing the opportunity, Devin maintained his position, taking aim and firing off several rounds to cover their retreat, effectively slowing the advance of the mob as they scrambled to regroup. As the men positioned themselves behind the new barricade of cars, the sound of tires screeching filled the air, indicating the immense force exerted by the advancing horde as they pushed against the vehicles. Despite their efforts, the sheer mass of the undead managed to shift the cars, gradually aligning them in the direction of the road. "Start lighting them up." Devin's command rang out, urging the men to resume their onslaught as they braced themselves for another wave of relentless attacks. The men behind the makeshift barricade unleashed a barrage of gunfire, the air resonating with the sharp reports of their weapons. Devin observed with a sense of approval as more zombies dropped under the relentless hail of bullets. Their marksmanship was impressive, but not unexpected in this prime hunting territory. Minutes passed as they continued to fend off the advancing horde, but as the creatures pressed against the next barricade, the men once again drew their handguns, unleashing a storm of bullets that dropped the undead one by one. However, the escalating danger prompted Devin to make a decisive call. "Okay, boys, pack it up and get to the fallback position," Devin commanded, urgency lacing his tone. "Get up to the roof and stay quiet. I'll let you know if there's something that needs shooting." Watching as the men broke away from the barricade and sprinted to safety, Devin quickly relayed the message over the radio. "Okay, Tatum, we're clear here. You're up," he announced. "Hang on to your ass," Tatum's response crackled through the radio. A moment later, the blaring alarm bell from the school pierced the air, signaling the start of their diversionary tactic. Devin instinctively ducked out of sight, ensuring he remained hidden from the advancing horde. "Come on, please work," Devin muttered anxiously to himself, his gaze fixed on the approaching mass of zombies. "I don't have enough bullets for all of you assholes." Observing as the creatures began to shuffle towards the source of the alarm, Devin sighed with relief. It took a couple of minutes before the entire mob redirected their attention towards the school, leaving the highway momentarily deserted. Quietly reaching for his radio, Devin spoke softly into the device. "Okay, Tatum, your plan is working a little too well," he reported. "The only zombies that aren't coming your way are the ones that got cut in half by the chain, and I'm pretty sure that they want to. Keep an eye on things, especially up the highway," Tatum responded, his voice carrying a note of caution. "You got it, boss," Devin affirmed. "And you let me know when you need some backup." "Hopefully we won't need any, but it's good to know it's there," Tatum replied before signing off. "Good luck," Devin said. The line went dead as Tatum tossed the walkie-talkie onto the teacher's desk, his focus shifting to the makeshift spear in his grasp as he approached the window. Glancing over at Mike and the other two men in the room, he noted their determined stance, their grip on their weapons firm as they prepared to face the approaching enemy. "Mike, are you and your guys ready for this?" Tatum inquired, his tone resolute. "Yes, sir. We will defend this town with everything we got," Mike replied with determination. "Oh, and I figured I should mention this now," Tatum added, a hint of levity creeping into his voice. "While we are a full-service protection squad, we don't do cleanup." The unexpected humor caught the civilians off guard, eliciting laughter before they quickly composed themselves. "Sorry, just felt like we needed a tension breaker," Tatum explained. It was a good line, Mike acknowledged with a nod. As the creatures drew nearer, closing the distance to 30 yards, Tatum stepped forward, whistling loudly to grab their attention. "Hey assholes, why don't you come over here? We got a little something for you," he called out, his voice ringing with defiance. They watched as a significant number of zombies responded to the provocation, shuffling towards their windows with eager moans matching their pace. "Okay, remember what I taught you," Tatum instructed, his voice calm yet authoritative. "Stab as hard as you can, but don't get close to the window. They're going to try to grab to pull you in, but they can't if you're far enough away. We have all the time in the world, so there's no reason to get yourself in a dangerous situation." Mike and the others nodded in agreement as the first zombie reached the window, its arms stretching through the open space, emitting guttural moans. Tatum stepped forward, his movements swift and decisive as he thrust his weapon with all his strength. The tip of the filed-off broomstick pierced through the creature's eye, causing it to convulse before collapsing. Tatum wasted no time in withdrawing the weapon from the undead skull. In the blink of an eye, another zombie took the fallen one's place at the window, accompanied by several more ghouls advancing towards the wall. "Hit them with everything you've got," Tatum commanded. All four men stepped forward, their movements synchronized as they thrust their weapons with all their might. Tatum and Mike swiftly dispatched the zombies at their window, their strikes precise and effective. However, the two younger men's blows only grazed their targets, scraping their knives against the sides of the undead's faces. Observing the struggle, Tatum quickly broke away from his position to provide hands-on instruction. He positioned himself behind one of the men, guiding his hands on the weapon. "Do it like this," Tatum instructed, demonstrating the proper technique. "Go as hard as you can while aiming at the bridge of their nose. Most of the time, it will glance off the bone and go into the eye." With Tatum's guidance, the man gained a better sense of the required force and angle. Stepping back, Tatum watched with pride as the two men executed the technique, swiftly dispatching the creatures with single, decisive blows. "Good, now just keep that energy up a few hundred more times," Tatum encouraged with a hint of humor. Tatum surveyed the line of creatures pressed against the building, focusing on the relentless onslaught before him. He worked diligently for several minutes, dispatching half a dozen zombies with precision strikes, his movements steady and determined. Suddenly, the sound of his radio crackled to life, drawing his attention away from the battle at hand. "Yeah, what is it?" Tatum responded, his voice tense with anticipation. "It's Devin," came the voice on the other end. "It looks like you boys have all you can handle." "Yeah, it looks like it from this vantage point too," Tatum replied, concern evident in his tone. "Do you have something for me?" "Yeah, you may want to start making more noise on your end, because a large number of those things are headed towards your weak spot," Devin explained. "Damn it, already?" "I figured they'd work their way up there eventually, but right out of the gate," Tatum muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "I don't know what to tell you, but they're headed for it like it's a damn siren's call," Devin added. As the realization dawned on Tatum, he momentarily lowered the radio, shaking his head in disbelief. "I'm an idiot," he muttered to himself. "What's wrong?" Mike inquired, noticing Tatum's reaction. "Just keep doing what you're doing. I'll be right back," Tatum replied, his tone determined. "You'll be right back," Mike exclaimed. Tatum's voice cut through the radio with urgency. "It's the damn alarm bells. One of them has to be in the lunchroom. That's what's drawing them," he explained. Devin swiftly adjusted his scope, scanning the area for any sign of the source of the disturbance, but found nothing. "It has to be inside because I don't see anything," Devin replied. "Just keep an eye on that glass. Let me know if it breaks," Tatum instructed. "What the hell are you doing?" Devin questioned. "I'm going to see if I can shut it up," Tatum responded resolutely. Devin remained silent, knowing that nothing he could say would dissuade Tatum from his self-imposed mission. With a sense of purpose, Tatum rushed over to the door, exerting all his strength to shove the heavy desk out of the way before throwing it open. Tatum sprinted as fast as his legs could carry him, maneuvering through the maze of desks that Edgar had arranged. It took him a minute of frantic movement, but he finally reached the other side, closing in on the lunchroom. The deafening clang of the alarm bell guided him toward its source. As he entered the open area, he looked up and spotted it. Without hesitation, he raised his rifle, his gaze briefly flickering to the damaged window where a horde of undead pressed against the glass. Pushing aside the distraction, Tatum focused on his target and fired a single round. The bullet struck the bell with precision, silencing its clamor and bringing a momentary respite to the immediate vicinity. Relief washed over him at the absence of the alarm bell's relentless ringing, but it was short-lived as the sound of breaking glass shattered the stillness, sending a surge of terror coursing through him. Tatum's heart pounded in his chest as he witnessed the sides of the window giving way, his presence in the lunchroom only serving to further excite the creatures pressing against the glass. Before he could retreat, one side of the window gave in, allowing several undead to breach the building. Tatum reacted swiftly, raising his rifle and firing multiple shots in their direction, hoping to hold back the tide. However, the relentless pressure from the horde outside proved too much to overcome. With a crash, the entire pane collapsed onto the ground, trapping a few of the zombies that had already infiltrated the building. Tatum continued to squeeze the trigger as fast as he could, desperate to slow the advancing horde, but his efforts proved futile as his gun clicked empty. As a flood of creatures poured into the school, Tatum's adrenaline-fueled sprint down the hallway was punctuated by his urgent cries, transmitted both over the radio and loud enough for those inside the school to hear. "We have a breach. We have a breach." Chapter 6. Tatum sprinted down the hallway, his heart pounding against his ribs as he passed the first classroom. Abruptly halting his stride, he skidded to a stop when Edgar's head popped out. "What the hell is going on?" Edgar's voice sliced through the tension. "We got company, and a lot of it." Tatum replied urgently. "Shit, already?" Edgar's tone was tinged with disbelief. "Yeah, already," Tatum confirmed grimly. Both men pivoted toward the top of the hallway, their eyes narrowing as a horde of creatures emerged into view. Tatum and Edgar gripped their weapons tightly, their fingers hovering over the triggers. With precision, they aimed and unleashed a barrage of bullets at their advancing targets. The creatures fell one by one, but their ranks seemed endless, with more trampling over the fallen bodies. "Get back inside and barricade the door," Tatum ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "These doors aren't going to hold up too long against them," Edgar observed. "I know, we'll figure something out. But we need to thin the herd out as much as we can," Tatum replied. Edgar nodded and darted back into the relative safety of the classroom. Tatum fired a few more shots before retreating through the maze of desks. At the next door, Reed appeared, already armed and ready for battle. He aimed and fired several rounds towards the oncoming mob, their numbers swelling with each passing moment. Tatum joined in, unleashing his own barrage of gunfire from behind the makeshift barricade. "Well, that didn't last long, did it?" Reed remarked wryly. "Give me a spear, the strongest one you've got." "No, screw that. Give me two," Tatum demanded. Reed nodded solemnly and disappeared into the classroom, leaving Tatum to discharge the remaining bullets in his magazine with deadly precision, dispatching several zombies in rapid succession. Moments later, Reed reappeared, carrying the requested weaponry along with additional spears for himself. "I only need two," Tatum asserted firmly. "I'm not going to let you go to war by yourself," Reed countered. "I know what I'm doing. If this is going to work, I need you in that classroom thinning the herd outside," Tatum commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Reed acquiesced with a silent nod, passing over the weapons to Tatum before retreating back into the relative safety of the classroom. As Tatum loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle and slung it onto his back, he tossed one of the spears a few rows back. Then, with a firm grip on the remaining weapon, a sturdy piece of rebar sharpened to a lethal point, he steeled himself for the impending confrontation. "Okay, assholes, let's do this." Tatum's voice boomed, echoing through the tense air as he prepared to face the relentless horde. Tatum maneuvered to the right, wielding the metal weapon with purpose, its metallic clang resounding through the hallway and cutting through the cacophony of alarms and moans emanating from the approaching horde. As the first few creatures stumbled over the strewn and stacked desks, their movements clumsy and erratic, Tatum wasted no time in dispatching them with swift, decisive strikes to the backs of their heads, swiftly neutralizing the immediate threat. However, he was quickly outnumbered as more creatures surged forward, trampling over their fallen brethren in their frenzied attempt to reach him. With calculated precision, Tatum thrust his weapon forward, impaling a creature in the chest before forcefully flinging it aside, sending it crashing into several others. Yet, even as they fell to the ground, more continued to press forward, their advance pushing Tatum back. With the fallen creatures temporarily incapacitated, Tatum swiftly drew his handgun and dispatched them with precise shots to the head before retreating behind the cover of the next row of desks. However, one particularly agile zombie caught him off guard, using the fallen bodies as stepping stones to propel itself forward with surprising speed. Tatum narrowly evaded its lunging attack, sidestepping just in time to avoid its grasping arms. Reacting quickly, Tatum swung the rebar weapon backward, striking the creature behind the knee and sending it crashing to the ground. As it struggled to rise, he delivered a decisive blow to its head, ensuring its permanent demise. Turning his attention back to the advancing mob, Tatum watched grimly as they pushed through the barricade of desks, their sheer numbers overwhelming. Behind them, dozens more lurked in the shadows, marching in his direction. Amidst the chaos, Frank and Eric emerged from their respective classrooms, their faces etched with grim determination. "Get down," Eric yelled. Tatum dropped to one knee, both men unleashing a barrage of gunfire that tore through the front ranks of the oncoming horde, swiftly neutralizing the immediate threat and buying them precious moments to reassess their strategy. "How are you doing out here, Tatum?" Frank inquired. "Getting my workout for the weekend? That's for damn sure," Tatum replied wryly. "What's the plan?" Eric interjected. "I'm going to buy us as much time as I can out here while you guys clear the ones in the front of the building," Tatum explained. "And then what?" Frank pressed. Tatum smirked knowingly, shaking his head at the predictability of Frank's response. "Ah, hell, it's one of those plans." "Okay, sure, why not?" Frank conceded with a resigned chuckle. "Just make sure the front of the building is clear," Tatum instructed firmly. As Frank and Eric nodded in understanding and retreated into the relative safety of the classroom, Tatum took a moment to regroup, his eyes scanning the rows of desks until they landed on his backup weapon, identical to the one he currently wielded. Turning his attention back to the advancing mob, Tatum watched with growing concern as their numbers continued to swell, pushing relentlessly forward. He glanced towards the classroom doors, noting with grim resolve the growing congregation of zombies attempting to breach their defenses. With the closest zombie still struggling to navigate through the barricade of desks, Tatum seized the opportunity, slinging his rifle back into position and taking aim towards the door at the far end of the hallway. With a series of precise shots, he dispatched a couple of zombies, their heads exploding in bursts of gore, drawing more attention his way. "Yeah, I'm down here. Come and get me." Tatum's defiant challenge echoed through the hallway. As a few of the creatures diverted their attention away from the door, Tatum realized it only served to allow more zombies to press up against it, intensifying the pressure on their barricade. With a furrowed brow, he watched as the desks slowly shifted his way, the relentless advance of the undead threatening to overwhelm him. Turning his focus to the top of the desks, Tatum observed several zombies stumbling over them, their grotesque forms inching closer with each clumsy step. Seizing the opportunity, he darted forward, scaling the makeshift barrier and delivering swift, decisive blows to the heads of the closest creatures. But as he swung for a third strike, Tatum's footing faltered, nearly causing him to lose his balance. In the split second of vulnerability, another zombie lunged forward, knocking the weapon from his grip. With a sharp intake of breath, Tatum stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest as the ghoul's hand grazed his foot. Reacting with lightning speed, Tatum drew his handgun and fired at near point-blank range, the echoing shots reverberating through the hallway. "Hey now, watch the shoes," Tatum quipped. Tatum retreated several rows, hastily grabbing the spare spear lying on the ground as he scanned the now crowded hallway. The sight of the encroaching horde, nearly filling the entire space, made him hesitate. While the urge to advance and take down more of the undead gnawed at him, the increasingly treacherous conditions with the shifting desks gave him pause. Deciding against further engagement, Tatum hurried back into the safety of his classroom, his voice echoing with urgency as soon as he crossed the threshold. "Give me a hand with this desk," Tatum called out. Mike, who had been stationed at the window, swiftly broke away from his post, rushing over to lend a hand. Together, they maneuvered the heavy desk back in front of the door, fortifying their defenses against the creatures in the hallway. Pointing towards another sturdy teacher's desk on the opposite side of the room, Tatum issued his next command. "We're going to need that one too," he directed, his gaze meeting Mike's with a sense of urgency. With determined nods, the two men raced across the room, straining their muscles as they dragged the cumbersome furniture across the floor. But as they attempted to lift the desk onto the barricade, Mike's expression turned grim. "If I get that thing a foot off the ground, it's going to rip my shoulders right out of their sockets," Mike said. Tatum nodded in satisfaction as he positioned the second desk snugly against the one barricading the door, ensuring their makeshift fortification was as secure as possible. "I think this will do," Tatum remarked, his tone brimming with cautious optimism as he surveyed their handiwork. "Is it bad out there?" Mike inquired. "Very bad." "But don't worry, I have a plan," Tatum reassured him. "Hopefully it's a step up from this one," Mike quipped with a half-joking smirk, earning a chuckle from Tatum. "Look at you, fitting in with us already," Tatum remarked playfully, wagging a finger in Mike's direction as the camaraderie between them blossomed. As Mike returned to his post at the window to assist the others, Tatum grabbed his radio. "Hey Devin, do you copy?" Tatum said. "I was hearing an awful lot of gunshots coming from the school. I was beginning to worry," Devin's voice crackled over the radio. "Well, given how much hell I put my teachers through in school, it would be karma for me to die in a school. But it's not going to be today, not if I can help it," Tatum replied. "What's the situation?" Devin inquired, his tone serious. "The hallway is jam-packed with those fuckers, and we're not going to be able to fight our way to safety without an assist," Tatum explained. "What can I do to help?" Devin asked. "First off, how is the outside looking?" Tatum inquired. "It's still looking pretty crowded outside. Those things are spread out all across the length of the school, and a good 10, 15 deep," Devin reported. "That's not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be," Tatum remarked, a hint of relief in his voice. "Well, don't get too excited yet. You still have a couple hundred of those things trying to get into the lunchroom," Devin warned. "Damn it. Even after I took out the bell," Tatum grumbled, frustration evident in his voice. "These things love playing follow the leader," Devin remarked dryly. "Yeah, that's true. But I got a question for you. How's it looking in your neck of the woods?" Tatum inquired. "Up here by the barricades? Pretty clear. Only half a dozen of those things wandering around, not counting the crawling torsos 100 yards up," Devin replied. "Okay, good. Is your squad still with you?" Tatum pressed. "On the building next to me," Devin confirmed. "Good, because you're going to need them." Chapter 7. Devin sat perched atop the roof, his head swaying in disbelief as he absorbed Tatum's latest scheme. "You know, Tatum, you're lucky it's the apocalypse," Devin remarked, his voice laced with incredulity. because if anybody heard the plan you just pitched to me back in the civilized times, you'd be a great candidate to be involuntarily committed." A chuckle crackled over the radio, signaling Tatum's response. "Oh, come on now, Devin. Don't act like this is the dumbest idea I've come up with so far this apocalypse." Devin pondered for a moment, his skepticism lingering like a shadow. "Yeah, I think this one is the winner." Tatum paused, memories flickering through his mind like distant flames. "Oh, that's right, you weren't there for Flat Creek, were you?" "I heard about it from Reed," Devin recalled, a wry grin tugging at his lips. And even with his dramatic retelling of the raft incident, this plan is still far crazier. Tatum's laughter echoed through the airwaves before he retorted, "I mean, if you have a better idea?" "Oh no." Devin replied with a shake of his head, determination firm in his tone. "We're going to do this plan. Mainly because I never want to hear that raft story again from Reed, and I figure this will shut him up." "That's good enough for me," Tatum conceded, a note of satisfaction evident in his voice. "How much time do you need?" Devin peered cautiously over the edge of the building, surveying the scene below where cars littered the ground and a handful of creatures roamed aimlessly. "It shouldn't be more than 10 minutes, Devin relayed over the radio. "I have to take these things out quietly." "Take 15, Tatum responded, his voice tinged with consideration. "We should be done with the outside zombies by then, but we could use a breather." "Don't go getting all soft on me, Tatum," Devin teased. "I was speaking more for Reed," Tatum clarified. "You guys know this is an open channel, don't you?" Reed interjected. The banter elicited laughter from both Tatum and Devin. "And I'm going to tell that raft story for as long as I live," Reed declared. "Not to me, you're not," Devin retorted amidst his laughter. "I'll be in touch soon. And my team, go over to Channel 12 for a minute." Despite Reed's attempt to continue, Devin ignored it, swiftly changing the radio frequency. "Okay, Jimmy, are you guys there?" Devin inquired. "Yeah, we're here, Devin," Jimmy confirmed. "So you heard the plan. Do we have any volunteers?" Devin asked. "We're all in," Jimmy affirmed. "Our people are in that school, and it's our town, so we're willing to do whatever it takes." "Good man. But I don't need all of you, just 3. And nobody moves until I deal with the ones by the barricades," Devin instructed. "We can give you a hand with those," Jimmy offered. "No, I appreciate the offer, Jimmy, but I've done this kind of work. A lot more than any one man should. I can handle it. I'll let you know when to come down," Devin assured. Devin's gaze traversed the distance to the rooftop opposite, where Jimmy stood. Though separated by space, the subtle movement of Jimmy's head conveyed compliance. "Yes, sir," Jimmy responded meekly. "Okay, hang tight." "This won't take long," Devin assured before leaving his sniper rifle on the roof. With swift, purposeful movements, he descended the ladder to the ground below. The combat knife strapped to his belt was drawn as he strode towards the highway. Rounding the corner of the building, Devin positioned himself behind the backstop barricade. From this vantage point, he observed a half-dozen creatures milling about. Some seemed indecisive, their gaze flickering towards the school, as if torn between staying or venturing forth. A couple of the undead stumbled, their movements hindered by the barricade. The force of the mob pushed them against the uneven metal of the older vehicles, their garments snagging and holding them in place. Devin navigated around the barricade, approaching his first target, a zombie ensnared on a wheel well, its gaze fixed on the school. With a swift leap over the car, he descended upon the creature, the blade of his combat knife plunging into its skull with precision. The distant alarm distracted the attention of the other creatures, save for one lurking a few yards away, focused on Devin's presence. The creature emitted an eager moan as it lurched towards Devin, who sidestepped with practiced agility, swiftly driving his blade into its temple and sending it collapsing to the ground. Without pause, Devin pressed forward, his movements fluid and precise. Approaching the next creature, which remained oblivious to his presence, he thrust the tip of his blade into the base of its skull. With a calculated shove, he propelled the ghoul into its companion a few paces away. The impact sent the undead crashing to the ground, dazed and disoriented. Before it could recover, Devon swiftly dispatched it, severing its unlife with a decisive strike. With only 2 creatures remaining and 1 immobilized, Devon stood poised, allowing the lone mobile ghoul to draw near. As it closed the distance, he shifted his weight, cracking his neck to the side before unleashing a powerful front kick. The force of the blow sent the creature tumbling backward, crashing to the ground in a heap. With swift efficiency, Devon drove the blade into the skull of the immobilized creature before darting across the open highway towards the last remaining ghoul. The creature writhed eagerly, attempting to free itself from its trap, but Devon swiftly ended its struggle by thrusting the blade through the bottom of the jaw and into the brain, extinguishing the remnants of life in its dead eyes. Retrieving his knife, Devon wiped it clean on the fallen ghoul before sheathing it. He then retrieved the radio from his belt. "Okay, Jimmy, you boys can come down now," Devon announced. Standing there for a moment, Devon struggled to contain his rising rage, as if battling against a haunting memory. Just as the conflict threatened to overwhelm him, Jimmy's voice broke through the turmoil. "Devon, are you all right?" Devon shook off the momentary lapse, returning to his usual composed demeanor. "Yeah, I'm good. Come on, let's break a couple of these cars free," he replied. They worked together to remove the binders holding the cars together, a task that didn't require much effort. Once the vehicles were freed, Devon positioned himself behind the wheel of a larger SUV, with Jimmy beside him. The other 2 men climbed into a heavy late-model sedan. "Okay, you get that car over to the back doors and put the front end of it against the exit," Devon instructed, addressing one of the men. "Don't push too hard on it because we don't want to weaken the frame. Just make sure it's flush against it so they can't break out." "Do you need us to stay there?" the man inquired. "No," Devon replied firmly. "Once you get the car in place, get the hell out of there and back to the roof. Tatum and the others should have the front of the school cleared by then, but if not, then you need to be careful." The man nodded in understanding as Devon turned to Jimmy, motioning for him to take the back seat. "Are you sure about this, kid?" Devon asked, concern evident in his tone. "I'm sure," Jimmy affirmed, his resolve unwavering. "Besides, I'm the best shot with a handgun out of those guys." "Did they give you all their ammo?" Devon inquired. "They did," Jimmy confirmed. "Okay, then get in the back and buckle up, because this is about to get crazy," Devon warned. Devon picked up the walkie-talkie, switching it back to the group channel. "Okay, Tatum, we're inbound," he announced. "We'll be ready." Tatum's voice crackled through the radio in response. Devon shifted the SUV into gear, flooring the gas pedal. The tires screeched on the pavement before gaining traction, propelling them forward with a jolt. Inside the vehicle, Devon and Jimmy bounced around as they veered off-road. Devon's grip on the wheel tightened as he steered the SUV directly towards the broken window in the lunchroom. As they approached within 50 yards of the window, they witnessed zombies pouring out of the building, congregating just a few steps outside, all of them trying to force their way inside. Though tightly packed inside, few ghouls ventured into the lunchroom, instead pressing towards the hallway. "Hang on, kid," Devon shouted. With alarming speed, the front of the SUV slammed into the pack, barreling through at 70 miles per hour. The first few ghouls were obliterated, their bodies disintegrating upon impact, while several others were crushed beneath the vehicle. Maintaining momentum, the SUV plowed deep into the building, mowing down creatures as if they were mere obstacles. Devon kept his foot firmly on the gas, ensuring they pressed forward enough to reach the hallway. Come on," Devon urged. The vehicle strained under the weight of the horde, its engine roaring as it pushed through to the hallway entrance. Although the SUV wasn't large enough to completely block the entrance, it came close, leaving barely enough room for a zombie to squeeze through. With the SUV in position, Devon swiftly shifted it into park and engaged the parking brake. He grabbed his gun and shouted, "Light them up." Both men inside the SUV opened fire, their shots echoing down the hallway as they aimed towards the zombies now focused on them. Bullets tore through the air, cutting down a dozen creatures in a matter of moments. As they continued to fire, clearing some space on their side of the vehicle, they heard the sound of hands pounding against the glass on the lunchroom side. Jimmy flinched, momentarily distracted. "Ignore them," Devin commanded. "They can't get through the window. Just keep clearing the hallway." Jimmy nodded and resumed firing alongside Devin, the two of them relentless in their efforts to mow down the advancing horde. After a solid minute of sustained gunfire, during which they emptied several magazines each, they paused to assess the situation. Motioning for Jimmy to stay back from the window, Devin moved to the passenger seat, surveying the carnage outside the SUV where piles of undead bodies lay stacked 2 or 3 high. Down the hallway, however, a couple of hundred creatures continued to shamble relentlessly in their direction. Devin swiftly picked up the walkie-talkie. "Hey guys, we're in position and mowing them down, but I don't think we have enough ammo to take them all out, so an assist would be nice. And we have a handful of those things on the lunchroom side if someone feels like going for a walk," he relayed. As Devin and Jimmy reloaded their weapons, they heard gunshots echoing from inside the classrooms. Though nobody dared to open the doors, they were firing through the small windows, doing what they could to thin the ranks of the approaching horde. The creatures seemed torn, some pressing against the doors while others continued their advance towards the SUV. "What do you say, Jimmy? You ready to finish this off?" Devin asked, determination burning in his eyes. "Absolutely," Jimmy replied, his resolve matching Devin's. The group joined forces, their combined firepower steadily thinning the ranks of the undead. The extermination of the zombies took the better part of 20 minutes, but eventually, every creature in the hallway was taken down. Jimmy and Devin sat in the vehicle, observing the futile attempts of the zombies on the lunchroom side to breach the glass. "So what are we going to do about them?" Jimmy asked, gesturing towards the trapped creatures. Devin glanced over his shoulder at the zombies and shrugged as he loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle. "Same thing we did with that lot," he replied resolutely. As they prepared to resume their assault, they heard shots echoing from the window. Devin raised his hand, signaling for Jimmy to stand down. They watched as Tatum and Reed navigated through the crowd, swiftly neutralizing the remaining threats. Once every creature was down, Devin and Jimmy exited the SUV, ensuring that the zombies at their feet were truly dead. "We appreciate the assist there, Tatum," Devin acknowledged. "Not a problem. We were tired of being in class anyway," Tatum quipped. "Everybody make it through all right?" Devin inquired. "Yeah, we're all fine. We're going to need a hell of a lot of ice packs, but other than that, we're good," Tatum confirmed, a hint of exhaustion evident in his voice. With smiles of relief, the group basked in the victory they had achieved. "Come on, let's get back to the highway and do one more pass. I'd hate to go through all this and have a straggler ruin it," Tatum suggested. Devin and Jimmy nodded in agreement as the group exited the school. With renewed vigor, they set off towards the highway to ensure that no stragglers remained to threaten their hard-won victory. Chapter 8. Tatum approached the crawling top half of a zombie torso, his gaze fixed on the grotesque sight before him, trying to comprehend the surreal scene. "I don't get paid enough to deal with this stuff," he muttered, a chuckle escaping his lips as he drove his spear into the creature's skull, putting an end to its twisted existence. Glancing around at his companions who were finishing their cleanup duties, Tatum received the all-clear signal. With a sigh of relief, he discarded his spear, signaling his exhaustion with the ordeal. As he stretched to alleviate the strain in his arms, Mike approached. "I think that about does it," Mike commented wearily. "Let's hope so, because we blew through most of our ammunition in the school," Tatum replied. "I wish we had some to give you back," Mike lamented. Tatum raised his hands in an apologetic gesture, shaking his head. "Oh no, you're fine, Mike. I wasn't implying that at all. You don't have to give us anything." "Well, it just don't feel right to not give you anything," You boys bailed us out of a hell of a mess, Mike insisted. I tell you what, Mike, Tatum began. If it will put your mind at ease, how about we do this? I'll have some of my men come down here and help you create some real defenses. And in exchange, you stay in touch and be an ally if we need it. We're more than happy to be your ally, Tatum, but I have to ask, what are you expecting? Mike inquired cautiously. I wish I knew Mike. But if the last 2 weeks have taught me anything, nothing is too crazy to happen, Tatum responded. That's an understatement, Mike said. Laughter filled the air as both men shared a moment of respite, but their tranquility was short-lived as Jimmy came rushing up. Tatum, sir. Jimmy called out urgently. What is it, Jimmy? Tatum's tone shifted instantly, alertness flooding back into him. It's your people. They just called in and need you to get back there as soon as possible. Jimmy relayed the message, his words injecting a sense of urgency into the atmosphere. Tatum's muscles tensed at the news, his mind instantly switching back to combat mode. What's going on? He demanded, his voice sharp with concern. They're not under attack. Don't worry, Jimmy reassured, sensing Tatum's unease. Those words provided a momentary relief, and Tatum visibly relaxed his stance. Then what is it? He inquired, his curiosity piqued. They said a plane just landed at the airport, Jimmy explained. Tatum glanced over at Mike, seeking his approval. Go and take care of your people. We'll handle the cleanup, Mike offered without hesitation, understanding the gravity of the situation. I'll let you know what happens, and when we'll be back to help with those barricades, Tatum promised. Understood. You boys be safe, Mike replied. With a nod, Tatum swiftly made his way to their vehicles, his commanding voice cutting through the air as he rallied his comrades. Everybody from St. Mary's, we have to roll out right now, he called out, urgency fueling his every movement. Half an hour later, the convoy rumbled into St. Mary's, tension palpable among the occupants as they braced themselves for the unknown. Pulling up to the restaurant at the town center, they were greeted by Maggie, who emerged with a calm demeanor, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. Tatum's heart rate slowed at the sight of his wife, her serene expression immediately easing his apprehension. She didn't appear distressed. Instead, a smile graced her lips, sending a wave of relief through Tatum's tense frame. As the group exited their vehicles, their weapons poised for action, Maggie intervened, her voice cutting through the tension like a beacon of reason. We need to start getting you boys some decaf. Relax, everything is just fine, she reassured, her words soothing their frayed nerves. What's going on? We heard somebody flew into the airport. Tatum inquired, his curiosity piqued. They did. And I think it's somebody you need to meet, Maggie replied cryptically, her gaze fixed on Tatum with unwavering certainty. Tatum exchanged a glance with Maggie, her assurance convincing him to lower his guard. Motioning for his companions to follow suit, he issued a directive. Okay, let's go meet the guests, he declared, his tone firm yet tempered with curiosity. The group complied, slinging their rifles over their shoulders as they followed Maggie into the restaurant. Seated at a far table was Maxwell, a figure in his early 40s exuding an aura of confidence. Tall and physically fit, with a mane of longer hair and a well-kept beard, he commanded attention. Flanking him on either side were two imposing men, their presence formidable despite the relaxed posture with which they carried their rifles. Go sit down and I'll bring some more coffee out, Maggie offered. Tatum approached the table, Maxwell rising to his feet and extending a hand in greeting. You must be Tatum, Maxwell remarked, his voice confident. I am. And who do I owe the pleasure? Tatum replied, reciprocating the handshake. My name is Maxwell. Please have a seat. We have much to discuss, Maxwell offered, gesturing to an empty chair. Tatum nodded and settled into the seat, while Maggie promptly emerged with a coffee pot and cups, pouring them each a serving. I'm afraid all we have is the non-dairy creamer, Maxwell, Maggie apologized. Oh, I prefer it black. I don't want anything diluting the caffeine, Maxwell replied, declining the creamer with a smile. Maggie exchanged a knowing glance with Tatum before nodding in acknowledgement. "So what brings you to our fair little town, Maxwell?" Tatum inquired, curiosity evident in his tone. "A partnership proposal," Maxwell began, his gaze steady. "I'm listening," Tatum responded, leaning forward with interest. "Like you and your men before the apocalypse, we retreated from the world to an extent. We used the skills our government gave to us in order to move further away from that government, because we saw how flawed it was," Maxwell explained, his words measured. "And for the most part we were left alone, broken up into our little self-sustaining groups. We always didn't see eye to eye with each other, so we stayed out of each other's way. No animosity, mind you, just differing viewpoints. However, now we all have everything in common." Maxwell continued, his expression grave. "We have everything in common?" Tatum questioned. "Oh, we absolutely do, Tatum. We face the same threats. The undead threatening to break down our door, the threat of succumbing to starvation, or the elements, or any of 1,000 other ways to perish. But most importantly, we were abandoned by our government in our time of need," Maxwell continued, his words resonating with a sense of betrayal. Maxwell paused, taking a sip of his coffee, the momentary silence adding weight to his words. "Now I do see the irony in being upset that the government we despised left us to our own devices. However, as you well know, they didn't just leave us. They left civilians. Lots of them, people who depended on them to help in a time of crisis. And who did those people look to for help? People like you and me, Tatum. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you and your men just got back from helping one such group of civilians," Maxwell said. "We did. A nice group of people just up the road from Spokane. Helped them deal with a mob of 2,000 of those things," Tatum confirmed. Maxwell's interest was piqued. 2,000? I'm impressed. Very impressed. When we have more time, I would love to hear how you pulled that off." "It was an adventure, that's for sure," Tatum admitted with a wry smile. "Well, I can't wait to hear the story. However, it will have to wait, because we have more stops to make, and I need to pitch you my partnership proposal," Maxwell declared, his tone businesslike. "We're all ears," Tatum replied, signaling his readiness to listen. "I represent a major group based in Bend, Oregon. And when I say major, I mean it," Maxwell began, his demeanor serious. "I bet. Bend isn't exactly a small town," Tatum remarked. "A population of 100,000 before the war. It took a lot of effort, a lot of coordination with the other groups in the area, but we amassed a force nearly 10,000 strong and took the city. Saved a lot of people in the process," Maxwell revealed, pride evident in his voice. Tatum couldn't help but whistle in awe at Maxwell's revelation. "You have a group that's 10,000 strong. Why in the world do you want to partner with a group of 30 that's 400 miles away?" Tatum questioned. "Because we're of similar mind, and these days you can never have too many allies. Plus, you aren't even the smallest group we've partnered with," Maxwell replied with a sly smile, sensing Tatum's confusion. "We've been busy with our outreach over the last couple of weeks. While Bend is the biggest force, we have groups covering the Northwest," Maxwell explained, his tone serious. "From the northern part of California up to the Canadian border and clear across to Boise. While we are all autonomous, we strategize together, help each other out with manpower and supplies, and most importantly, we're united against the potential threat that is coming our way," Maxwell continued, his words carrying a weight of urgency. "What threat is that?" Tatum inquired, his brow furrowing in concern. "The government," Maxwell replied, his tone grim. Tatum glanced at his men, their expressions mirroring his own apprehension. "They cut bait and ran on the first day of this," Tatum interjected. "Believe me, I am well aware of that. They retreated all the way to Kansas, as a matter of fact. However, we have reliable intelligence that points to them making a play for Seattle," Maxwell revealed, his voice tinged with foreboding. Tatum pondered Maxwell's words for a moment before nodding in agreement. "I can see that, actually," Tatum said. "Strategically, it makes sense. However, it has the potential to cause us trouble. Because if there's one thing our government is known for, it's not asking permission, as it takes what it wants and needs from those who can't defend it. We have fought, bled, and died to defend our homes and the lives of others, and if the government decides to leave us alone, we have no problem living side by side with them. However, if they come for our resources, that will be a different story, Maxwell cautioned, his tone somber with the weight of experience. So, in this partnership, what would you like us to do? There's 30 of us capable of fighting, which is nothing compared to what they have, Tatum acknowledged. Fighting is a last resort, Tatum. However, before they can take Seattle, they have to take Spokane, which is what they are planning to do over the next few days. Once they achieve their objective and settle in, I'd like you to go up and introduce yourselves. Feel them out. And report back what you find, Maxwell outlined. Yeah, we can do that. We're just a stone's throw away from Spokane, so getting to know the new neighbors makes sense, Tatum agreed. Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that you're on board with this. And as with all partnerships, it's a two-way street of cooperation, Maxwell affirmed. That is good to know. However, I'm not sure what you can do for us at the moment, Tatum admitted. Well, I hope you don't mind, but I took a stab in the dark and brought along some welcome gifts. On the tarmac as we speak, your men are unloading 10,000 rounds of rifle ammunition, Maxwell revealed, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. Tatum's eyes widened in astonishment at the news, his gratitude evident as he began nodding in appreciation. That's incredibly generous of you. I'm not sure we can accept that, Maxwell, Tatum expressed, his tone filled with humility. You can and you will. You're doing good work up here, and we want to help you continue to do so, Maxwell insisted firmly, his conviction unwavering. And the ammunition we're providing is just the tip of the iceberg. Our resources are vast and growing, Maxwell added. It is appreciated, and rest assured, we will live up to our end of the partnership, Tatum assured, his commitment unwavering. I have no doubt that you will, Maxwell replied. Glancing at his watch, Maxwell swiftly finished his coffee and rose to his feet. I apologize for cutting this short, but we have another stop to make before we can head home for the day, Maxwell explained. Tatum stood up, shaking Maxwell's hand as they made their way toward the exit. I look forward to hearing what you find in Spokane, Maxwell remarked, his gaze meeting Tatum's with anticipation. You'll know something as soon as we do, Tatum promised. Maxwell nodded appreciatively as Maggie stepped forward, gesturing down the street for a vehicle to approach. They'll take you back to the airport. Thank you for dropping by, Maxwell. You're welcome here anytime, Maggie offered warmly, her hospitality genuine. I appreciate your hospitality, Maggie. Do your best to keep this one in line. He seems like a handful, Maxwell joked, giving her a wink before getting into the car. As the vehicle disappeared around a corner, the rest of the men gathered around Tatum, their expressions a mix of surprise and curiosity. Well, that was unexpected, Eric remarked, breaking the silence. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, Reed added, voicing the confusion shared by the group. Tatum smiled, nodding in agreement before addressing his men. It's simple, Reed, Tatum began, his voice filled with a sense of relief. We're not alone in the apocalypse anymore. The end.